Hi, I'm Mark Small. This is Civil Discourse Now. It is December 6th, 2024. And Cassie Jackson is with me today. Cassie, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate this.
Well, it's a long-term contract that you have with this show, and we're trying to get coast to coast and planet to planet. There have been okay. I just want to preface this by saying that Micah Beckwith is going to be the lieutenant governor on, I think January 1 is when they swear in. And he had made a point in his campaign leading up to the Republican convention last summer that he was going to go into classrooms and make sure they're teaching true history. And that means lying the way he does. But there have been new developments on Westfield schools and his wanting to go in there. Is that correct?
That's correct. As of this morning, can I pop back to what you just said real quick and note that he doesn't have a teacher's license? Is that accurate?
Yeah. And see, you can't just walk into a school and talk to kids. And it's not like even in the 60s and the 70s, they clear it with the principal. I don't think that they had files they could check backgrounds on, but you couldn't just walk in and do that. So he's going in there either in an official capacity, and he's not elected yet. And if it is an official capacity, there's nothing within the office of Lieutenant Governor of the state of Indiana that affects education. And they're trying to strip away, the Republican Party is trying to strip away anything that Beckwith can do beyond the core things that he can do. So it's either because he's there as a part of his job as a public servant, he doesn't have a teacher's license, of which we're aware, or he's going in for a personal reason. His kids don't go to school there. So
right. And also the personal reason he said already repeatedly, which is to find the bad apple teachers and dox them. Let me remind you that doxing is not just harassing online. That's releasing sensitive information about someone and their family members to people who want to do harm to them. So yeah.
And he's doxed people in the past.
Yeah, it's just a totally unsafe working environment, in my opinion, for the teachers to have to walk into with that kind of knowledge, right? Because he's extreme. He'll see a rainbow on the door and note the person's name, and then he'll go from there. Is my fear. But anyway, go on. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. So what's the latest? The latest on his? Because I just want to make sure people knew. And thank you for asking me. Go ahead.
Sure. So I wrote an email to the superintendent after he was recorded a few days ago saying that the reason that the kids were coming back was because some students wanted Micah Beckwith, to come back in the classroom. Those are students that go to his church. Micah said that on the radio station. It's a very small handful. And so I pushed back to the superintendent as to why that was appropriate, based on the idea that that's why we protect students. Their brains aren't developed, their critical reasoning skills, impulse control, all that. We shouldn't be basing safety decisions on these kids. So anyway, what I wanted to get into today is there is some new information, and it's not what I want. At this point, the superintendent got back to one of our advocates who called and left a voicemail last evening with concern. He spoke to the superintendent, Mr. Kaiser, today for about a half an hour, 20 minutes to a half hour, to address his concerns. And at this point, Micah's still coming into Westfield High School, which I don't think we should stop pushing for that to fully be called off. Let me just say that. But what the superintendent said to this advocate this morning was that had he known, right, that Mr. Beckwith was the way that he was, had he been aware before when he was first invited in, and remember that happened by breaching protocol of bringing adults into the school because that teacher went above the principal's head. Had he been aware of the rhetoric, then Mr. Beckwith would not at all have been in the first place signed off on or invited into Westfield Washington School, which is great. We can go back and say that all we want, right, Mr. Kaiser? But what he did go on to say was this will be the last time Mr. Beckwith is allowed in the Westfield Washington school districts, in any of the schools. He will come, and this will be his first and only time, because he is not invited back into that school system moving forward. And we can get into but why now? Why? And I'm with you on that, but that's the first thing. Did you want to say anything, Mark, or do you want me to keep going?
No, keep going.
And then the second thing of note was that it's already been in discussion in terms of who is going to be monitoring Mr. Beckwith, right? And I'm going to follow up because there are advocates that want police presence there. and I'm going to get to that. It did not get discussed in this conversation with this advocate, but what the superintendent said is not only will only students who want to present to Micah be made to do so, but also that Mr. Beckwith would not be speaking to the class. He will be sitting and watching these presentations by students, only those who want to present in front of him. And there will also be other adults in that room, including school board members from the Westfield, Washington schools, the superintendent himself, per my advocate, and the superintendent didn't say this, Paul didn't say this, but my advocate felt like that Paul himself was considering actually, just to make sure things were copacetic, being in that room based on how they were talking and what Mr. Kaiser said to him. And I don't want to even pretend to know those words. But so in that sense, they are making sure there's going to be adult presence around these children. And if anything is said off topic, it will be shut down immediately. And so I think that that's a good step if they're going to bring him in. I think it's still a wrong decision to bring him in. But and then as we also know, students can opt out of that. What I want to just really quickly finish up by saying is the remainder of that, which I've talked to with a bunch of people and will be composing in a letter to send to the superintendent, is the following. Mr. Beckwith should not be able to record or use his cell phone or have it out when he is in the schools. If he's in that classroom, students are already allowed to opt out of that, so they don't have to be in his presence if that happened. They cannot get any kind of penalty on grade if they don't report in front of Mr. Beckwith, nor if they don't attend class that day. We're also going to be asking, go ahead.
It's really important on the recording because Beckwith has voiced approval, as I understand, of an individual who had videoed a trans child, using restroom facilities and posting those online. And Beckwith approved of that, which is horrific.
Yeah,
and so wait, he cannot be trusted with any kind of recording device or anything that could be used to further what he does, which is completely ignoring the best interests of children.
That's right. And that's why we also want a uniformed police officer with him. And so when we say monitor him, I really mean it, because Mr. Beckwith, as he walks through the halls, when we talk about putting teachers at risk, he can see based on what's hanging outside of the door, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to use the example of a rainbow, right? What if there's a rainbow? What's to say Michael's not going to get out and snap a picture of that room, that teacher's name on it, and then take that back to his people? And so I think that is thank you for adding to that. That's a big one. We do want students in that classroom to be able to record him. So that would be against the policy of no cell phones out during class. We're going to push for that being allowed so that everything can be captured if the students would like that. We also do not want Mr. Beckwith to have access to the student facilities in terms of restrooms. I think that's entirely inappropriate.
Absolutely. And I mean, my last visit to a school, secondary, primary, there are separate facilities for adult teachers, for elementary schools and even for high schools, as I recall. Right. So, it's not like if you have to use the head, you have to go into one of the students' restrooms. They've got facilities.
And if there would be some kind of accident situation with him, like that's again why he needs to have a uniformed officer with him at all times, who we would want to then escort him into the bathroom, right? If there was some kind of emergent situation where he couldn't make it to whatever. Also, the parents would like to be allowed in that classroom, parents of those students. So there's some things that we're still going to be pushing for, I think. But I was going to say something, but yeah, overall, I think, the new developments of the fact that he will never be allowed back in that district are huge, and that's putting their foot down. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that the parents being able to be there to make sure he doesn't do something to harm their children. Beckwith, that's parents' rights.
Yes. That's great, Mark.
Cassie, thanks for updating us on that. That is really cool. And
I'd like to just say shout out to my advocate who did that. I'm going to keep him anonymous for right now, but he's going to continue to be in touch. I would really like everyone to please continue to call. Today's action item is to call to get the date. Okay. Yes. continue dissenting about him being there. Absolutely, because we need that. We need to try to get this to be prevented altogether, in my opinion. But for today's action item, if we can call and try to get the date scheduled, that's going to be really helpful. And then stay tuned to the page, because we are going to have activities both on the day that Micah goes to the school and also leading up to that in protest.
Super. Cassie Jackson, thank you. Civil Discourse Now, Mark Small, signing off. Have a good one, everybody.